On February 21st, 2023, just after 8 p.m. on the north wall of the Wanda Plaza building in Jinan, the capital city of Shandong Province, the phrases, "Down with the Communist Party, down with Xi Jinping," in white letters on red background were seen. It attracted a lot of attention. In the tightly controlled Red China, who has the guts to do this? Right away, the Chinese Communist authorities deployed a large number of police to try to arrest the person in question. However, they failed because the young man who projected the message, Chai Song, had already left the country. He used remote control projection to accomplish this big operation. He has now escaped to the US through a secret route. The term routing refers to the fact that in recent years, Chinese people have taken the risk of illegally entering the US from Latin America to obtain a residence permit. Starting in late December 2022, Chai Song began his plan. He gradually purchased equipment. As I progressed in my work, the further I went, the more uneasy and scared I felt, because I knew that I couldn't afford to make a single mistake, or the consequences could be very serious. In that situation, I was thinking more about the whole process and the details, how not to be arrested, how to get out of the country safely, and how not to affect other people. He chose to use projections and purchased a projector. He then spent more than 7,000 yuan, or about US 1,000, on a laser carving machine. At that time, he had the manufacturer carve a few words, and they looked great. He then bought lenses and started to learn the carving technique by himself, for which he went to the manufacturer many times. All these preparations took about a month. Chai Song chose a location in his hometown in Shandong Province and rented a place. He set up his own equipment without letting the landlord in to check things. When the landlord came to inquire, he said he was in the advertising business. The equipment was used by the advertising industry. Especially when I was carving the characters, I repeated many times, including trying different sizes. In the middle of it, I found the material may not work yet, so I replaced the lens once. The main thing was the size of the engraved characters. They must be the same size as the size given to me by the manufacturer. When I was doing this, I needed a computer to control the laser carving machine. I purposely reinstalled the operating system with a genuine Windows. I was concerned that the computer might get hacked. I asked the manufacturer deliberately if I needed an internet connection to operate the device. The manufacturer told me that I didn't need an internet connection, so I felt that it would be safe at that time. On the night of January 17, 2023, the day before Chai Song made his escape to the US, he dismantled all of his computer mainframes and burned them in a vacant lot in a residential neighborhood. He didn't want to burn the laser carving machine because it was very expensive, even though he knew that it would leave behind a record of its operation. He intended to resell it, but then ran out of time, so he stored it at his father's place and didn't tell him anything about it. Even when his father asked, he didn't reveal a word about it. On the evening of February 21st, 2023, Chai Song, who had already left China, began his remote control and initiated the projection. I was in a hotel in David, Panama, and the time I received the video was 5:41 local time. Before starting, I told them that I wanted to display the slogan and you could help me take a video. He said okay, no problem, and then they helped me take a video. What I thought was that many people would be filming at that time, and he would definitely not be the only one. Therefore, I thought at the time, what crime could be constituted by shooting the video? But later, I learned that they have no bottom line and no laws when it comes to political matters. Only his girlfriend knew that he had rented a room on purpose. Later, Chai Song learned that his girlfriend and the two friends who had helped him film the video were missing. Eventually, I got in touch with my friend's girlfriend, and she told me that more than 50 people went to his place that night to arrest him, and the building was full of people who stood in the hallway. Yes, and just as many people in his neighborhood came out to spectate. When it happened, Chai Song's family was very worried. He said many people advised him, You don't have to be like this, just live your life. Many people advised him, you have to think about yourself and also think about your family. If I did it purely for me personally, I don't think I would do it because it doesn't bring me any financial gain. I think I'm an odd person. When I see something that I think is unjust, I want to speak up. If I don't speak up, I would feel terrible and find it suffocating. I hate to see things like that happen. I think we are born as human beings, and speaking up is a right given to us by God. It's freedom of speech. It shouldn't be taken away by anyone. Chai Song tried to convince his girlfriend to go with him, but was unsuccessful. But I couldn't convince her. At that time, I did tell her clearly that I probably wouldn't come back because I wanted to live the rest of my life like a human being. And I didn't want to live and survive in a place that didn't treat me like a human being. I regretted it. My only regret is that I didn't insist on taking them out with me at that time. In the year that followed, Chai Song remained silent, trying to protect his girlfriend and friends in this way. He said he thought that the CCP would not use the method of implicating people, but he was proved wrong. The CCP has no bottom line. After a year of silence, Chai Song hasn't heard from them, meaning his girlfriend and 2 friends are still missing. He has decided to open up and tell the story to the media. Some of the other pro-democracy activists, people who have been persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party, whose experiences, whose voices I've seen on YouTube or on Twitter, tell me that it's the safest thing to do to speak out, because when enough people pay attention to them, they'll be under pressure instead. Chai Song started his career in China as a real estate agent and then went into business for himself. His experience, like that of many awakening Chinese, began with confusion. While working in Beijing, he fell victim to the Beijing government's campaign to clean up the so-called low-end population. It was November 2017, and a flood of people deemed low-end were being evicted from their rented apartments into the freezing streets. The government said it would give 2 to 6 days, but in reality it was the police who kicked in the doors and ordered the low-end population to evacuate immediately, and it's now, right away, not a single night's delay. The police knew how cold it was in Beijing in the winter, and if they drove people out into the streets, they would naturally choose to leave the city. Our industry, we don't pollute, we use electricity. It doesn't affect anyone else. The government says we are a low-end industry and we need to be cleaned out. When the government needs you, you are a high-end talent. When it doesn't, you become a low-end person. Later, the media estimated that more than 100,000 people from out of town were forced to move out of Beijing at that time. At that time, business was all right, but with Beijing's policy of cleaning up the low-end population, it was fatal and devastating to us. Chai Song saw the absurdity of the government's behavior. Those stores run by the so-called low-end population couldn't continue to operate legally in Beijing. During that time period, they became all illegal overnight, and then the government dispatched people to close down all the storefronts. Those that had their windows changed into doors, or those that had changed the main structure to make doors on their own, were restored to their original structure, preventing them from operating and from doing business. They would also tell you that your license would have to be reapplied for. But when you go to reapply for the license, you were told they wouldn't approve the license. During the 3-year epidemic, Chai Song returned to his home province of Shandong. In the midst of the strict lockdown, Chai saw many people in his neighborhood who could not bear the pressure and chose to end their lives by jumping off buildings. But by that time, Chai Song was already breaking out of the Communist Party's mind control. He had already begun using a VPN, a tool for climbing over the firewall. It changed his life trajectory. In China, the internet is essentially a large local area network with no access to Google, Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. A friend of Chai Song's who used VPNs for academic exchanges recommended one VPN. So Chai spent 180 yuan or about $25 a year on the VPN, joining the ranks of climbing out of the firewalls of mainland China. Some Chinese YouTubers have estimated that more than 40 million people in China are using VPNs to bypass the firewall.
他通过网络防火墙把全中国14亿人与
The CCP isolates all of the 1.4 billion people in China from the world through firewalls. What we know or perceive about the world is through its official propaganda. So, when I was exposed to the world's information, I realized that a lot of my previous perceptions were wrong. During that whole period of time, I was in a bad mood. After all, it shocked my whole value system. But as I learned more about it, I slowly adjusted my mindset and realized that I was completely wrong before.
随着我更多的了解之后，慢慢的调整过来了这个心态，发现我之前都是错误的。
This young man saw the blank page movement and was excited by it.
The white paper movement soon spread to over 50 universities in China. No to nucleic acid test, yes to freedom. The young people of Hong Kong also showed their solidarity.
我是在 YouTube 上看到的，有这回事。当时因为我在家乡被封着。
I saw on YouTube that there was such a thing. I couldn't do anything because I was locked down in my hometown. But I silently raised a paper in my home. Because I couldn't participate, I lit 2 candles and I was very moved and excited, especially to see so many people saying such brave things. Especially on the Urumqi Road in Shanghai, they shouted, "Down with the CCP, down with the CCP, down with Xi Jinping." At that time, I was sweating for them, and I said they were really brave. But then I realized that they might get arrested, and I also realized the seriousness of the matter, and I was sweating for them at that time. It was really very brave, and a lot of them were students, the kind of people who were just trying to do something for the good of this country, trying to do something for this country.
想为这个国家做点事情的人。
Previously, the Sitongqiao incident in Beijing had already lit the spark for Chai Song's future courageous actions.
我产生这个想法呢，也是
What really made me come up with this idea was also inspired by Peng Lifa and then the fire in Xinjiang, and the blank paper revolution, and a series of human rights activities. Through their influence, I might have come up with this idea, but what really made me decide to implement this idea would still be the haphazard relaxation of the epidemic restrictions, a major public policy-making failure. The rage within has a cumulative process.
累积的过程。
The Peng Lifa mentioned by Chai is a Chinese citizen. In 2022, before the 20th National Congress of the CCP, Peng staged a banner in Sitongqiao, Beijing. It was a shocking event at home and overseas, and one that inspired more Chinese people to follow suit. Let's take a look back at the scene. On October 13th, before the 20th Communist Party Congress, 2 shocking banners appeared on a bridge in Beijing, China's capital. The video and pictures first went viral on Chinese social media, then were blocked, but have since drawn much international media attention. Public protests against the top leadership are extremely rare in mainland China, especially on the eve of an important political meeting. The National Congress of the Communist Party, which takes place twice every 10 years, is the most important event in Chinese Communist Party or CCP politics. To ensure the security of the 20th National Congress, Beijing has been heavily guarded, including the flow of people, logistics, and even routine financial operations being placed on hold. It's against this backdrop that 2 banners were hung on a bridge named Sotong. One banner reads, "No nucleic acid test but food, no lockdown but freedom, no lies but dignity, no cultural revolution but reform, no leaders but votes, no slaves but citizens." Another reads, "No class, no work, strike to remove the dictatorial traitor Xi Jinping." Wearing a red top and yellow helmet, the protester tricked the police by pretending to be a construction worker. It's believed he had help. Rolling smoke was seen on the bridge. Recordings of protest slogans were played over loudspeakers to attract public attention, and clear footage of the scene from all angles was captured on camera. At that time, my first impression was that this person was very brave, exceptionally brave, and the slogan made was also very straight to the point. Every phrase resonates deeply with the people and was the most convincing thing to say to the people at the moment. That was what I thought, and then it was very exciting. I was very excited at that time, and I was amazed that there appeared such an individual. When the CCP decided to unblock the country at the end of 2022, instead of feeling happy and relieved, Chai Song came to the idea of fleeing China. I just wanted to escape from this place as soon as possible. If you tolerate this wave, then you will have to tolerate the next wave, and countless waves in the future. At that time, in our part of the country, it cost 30,000 to 50,000 yuan to buy a coffin, and usually it was 3,000 to 5,000 yuan. I think everyone wants to know what we've been doing for the last 3 years. We were doing nucleic acid tests over and over again. Some of us were doing them twice a day, even 3 times a day. We spent money on stabilization, shutting down roads, and containment. I don't know, this baffles me. It's just that in this case of the epidemic, a lot of what the world was doing was different from what we did. Before leaving China, Chai Song wanted to do something for the country. He thought of following the example of Mr. Peng Lifa in the Sitong Bridge incident. Mr. Peng has been missing and no one knows if he is still alive or where he is being held. It just so happens that it's probably because of his spirit of not being afraid to make sacrifices that has moved and influenced people. That's what's been going on inside me, and that's what I've wanted to do. But at the same time, I also hope to influence some people so that they can recognize the world, China, and the Chinese Communist Party more clearly. Chinese people aren't the same as the Chinese Communist Party, and the Chinese Communist Party doesn't represent the Chinese people. So, in Chai Song's eyes, what do these mainlanders in China now need most? I think what they need most is to be themselves. That is, everyone should be awake to know the world, to know China, to know the CCP. As for what they choose for themselves, that's up to them. I think this is what matters. First of all, we need to bypass the firewall. I think it's particularly meaningful for Xi to do what he did, to dismantle the CCP's firewall, and that's the most effective way to counter the CCP. I feel that when lies no longer pervade the entire society, everyone will be one step closer to understanding the truth. Xiao Xinxin, whose real name is Yang Ziwei, is a media personality, a former special correspondent for Radio Free Asia, and has lived in Southeast Asia for more than 10 years. In March 2023, he launched a campaign to tear down the CCP's firewall. In mid-April 2023, Yang was threatened and kidnapped by the CCP transnationally at the end of May and brought back to China. He was charged with the crime of subversion of state power.